How's it going, guys? It is Grizzle, and I think I've got the biggest reveal for the next title update yet. Just for those unfamiliar about it, although I've mentioned it a billion times by now, this is obviously a huge update coming to the game, which is going to change a lot about how you might play Evolve. The rest of the footage which I'm about to share with you is pretty damn interesting. Just know that the footage is still stuff that's in development, so it could be due to change at any time. The changes that I'm going to be showing you are from 3 of the class's abilities, so that's the Assault Shield, the Support's Cloak, and the Trapper's Dome. And as far as I'm aware, the Medic's Heal Burst is going to be staying the same. Right, so let's talk about the situation that's going to be happening with the Trapper, or more specifically the Dome. So looking back on the clip I just showed you, don't worry, I'm going to explain everything to do with this, but you'll notice that in the bottom center of the screen, the Trapper has the Dome icon there, rather than located where it normally is on the right hand side. Now, I know quite a few people on the forums already know this and have been teased this, but for those of you that don't know, the Trapper's Dome is no longer a Trapper ability, but something all hunters will have access to. Of course, for people that have been with the game for quite a long time, that is a very big change and a very big adjustment. But standing back and looking at how it's going to work, this is going to be so much better in so many different ways. So in case you missed that piece of pretty crucial info, it does mean that any class can actually trap the monster. Now, I know I'm going to get those fair few people who are instantly going to go, "Grizzle, that's way overpowered, oh my god." And yes, you're right, it would be if it was the only change coming to the game, but it's not. The changes that I mentioned in this video are not the only things coming to the game. There are a lot of other buffs, nerfs, and complete changes of the mechanics or variables of the game that you have to take into account to understand that this will be very balanced and will actually work for the better. Of course, I don't know the full details of every little thing that's been changed in the game, but I am going to try and do my best to explain why these changes have come in and why it is going to make Evolve a lot more fun. So starting off with every hunter having access to the Dome, yes, that does mean that hunters are going to be able to spread out along the map a lot more and have a lot more chance of catching the monster. But there, of course, are other things that you are going to have to take into account. If you trap a monster on your own in this next title update, monsters are going to be very powerful, and they will likely get you down very quickly if you don't have your teammates near you. So yes, you might be able to spread out more and have more chance of catching the monster, but by doing so, you are splitting yourself off more from the rest of your team. But even so, it is going to be easier to trap the monster, and that's just one of the reasons why maps like Distillery are being increased in size, so that monsters do have that sneak option. Even so, domes are going to happen a lot more often and going to be easier to get in certain circumstances. The truth is, this is also fantastic for brand new players and going to make the game a lot more fun. I think we can agree that the funnest part of Evolve is actually being in a dome with the monster and fighting it. And for a new player coming in, especially going as a Trapper, you're probably not going to have such a fun time, because if you don't know what you're doing, you're not going to be able to trap the monster. Your team's not going to have fun because obviously you're not trapping the monster, which is a really crucial part of the game. If you actually know how to go about trapping the monster and working with your team to do so, you will know that it's obviously a fantastic experience. And I think that's where Evolve had a bit of a downfall, because new players were coming in and thinking that the game was a bit of a running simulator, when in fact they just really didn't know how to go about trapping the monster or playing correctly. So by giving everyone the Dome, it does give that fantastic freedom that, you know, it can take a lot of pressure off the Trapper for one, and you know, it's definitely more of a team effort to actually trap the monster. So because of this very specific change, I can assure you that there's been, of course, a load of other changes that have made it so that the game will suit this change and it will work very well. Now, I know there's going to be quite a few unanswered questions that do come along with this, so I'm going to try and do my best to answer the questions I could think of off the top of my head. Anything that I do miss, I'm pretty sure that the developers will be happy to answer them if you go on the forums, but either way, as we get teased more and more information, everything will probably make a lot more sense. So probably the most popular one is going to be what the Trapper now has in replacement for the Dome, because of course, if it's being removed from its slot, then, you know, the Trapper needs something in replacement, and that's exactly what this clip is showing. So apart from that sound effect being really satisfying, you do have a blue-like pulse, and that's where you want to draw your attention back to the Dome icon, because you'll see that it's also acting as a compass. Now, I haven't actually got the official name for this class ability or the actual icon picture, because you'll notice that it's blocked off by the Trapper icon in the bottom right, because apparently, like, I don't know, some some shit has to be released legally, so yada yada yada, but I can at least tell you what it does. So when you actually release this blue pulse, it actually covers the entirety of the map, no matter where you are. So in covering the whole map, it is inevitably going to hit the monster, and when it does hit the monster, you get a red slice on your compass. Now this red slice actually shows the monster's direction, and of course as you move around, the slice will move to the direction of where the monster is, but this only lasts for a period of 5 seconds. Also, when you do use this, it'll actually come up on all of the other hunters' compasses or dome icons so that everyone can see the direction of where the monster is for those 5 seconds. In turn with this, the trapper also gets an increase in speed. I guess that's so that, you know, they can obviously move in the right direction very quickly, and it will actually help the trapper be more of a predominant person to be able to trap the monster. But regardless of that speed buff, everyone has the ability to throw the mobile arena. So with this pulse showing the direction of where the monster is, you might think that now sneaking's completely out of the question. I would say that it does nerf sneaking, but I still think sneaking will be a huge part of the game, and I think it will still be important. Although hunters will be able to get a rough direction of where you are, it's only for 5 seconds, and then of course there is a cooldown that comes with that, which obviously gives you sneak time in between. The pulse is also a fantastic idea for new players because, for instance, if a monster is playing it sneaky and actually manages to pull off some really good dukes and gets on the other side of the map, it doesn't mean that the hunters are going to be wasting half the game in one side of the map not knowing where the monster is, and they'll quickly find out once the trapper's pulse cooldown is finished that he is actually in the other direction. But depending on how big the cooldown is for the pulse, it still will buy time for the monster, so I still think it will actually work out very well and very favourable. So anyway, that is the main ability for the trapper and the situation with the dome, which has now become available to all the other hunters. And I guess it's important that you know that all the hunters can actually take down the dome as well, and they all do share the same cooldown. The cooldown for the dome is obviously inevitably longer because everyone does have access to the dome, it just makes sense, so monsters in return do get longer in time to feed. There are obviously questions that are still unanswered. For instance, who does the monster have to kill in order to take down the dome? I would assume it's whoever actually threw the dome, and then there'll be some sort of icon to show that that player is the one that the monster needs to target if they want the dome to come down. Anyway, out of all the changes, that is probably the biggest change, so now I've actually covered what the trapper's class ability is and the situation with the dome. Fucking hell, I cannot believe that took 8 minutes to explain. So finally we move on to the one that I was probably the most interested in, and that is the change to the support's cloak. Although the cloak in many situations has been very useful, it has never really been very player friendly. For a start, you have to know how to use the cloak correctly to be effective with it, with footprints and obviously not shooting when you're cloaked or fire dots, but more so it's been a lot more toxic for monster players. Now of course I'm talking more for the average / beginner player. The cloak was enough to really make players or people rage because it is very frustrating when you're maybe about to get the support down, they completely go invisible to you and you might not know how to handle it properly. Then a few seconds later they reveal themselves with full health again as you're getting ass raped, and again not something you're probably going to find that fun. Not to mention, as a support you should actually be supporting your teammates. The cloak was never really used or very rarely used to, help cloak, teammates, especially for new players. A lot of the time it was normally used for a more selfish use to actually get away or stay safe. So in many respects I'm very happy and sad, I guess, to say that the support's cloak is being removed and being replaced with this. Now, I know initially this might seem a bit of a shock for you, because trust me, it was for me as well, but I'm going to do my best to try and explain the situation that's actually going on here. So the new support's class ability is essentially a shield burst. Now, before I go any further, it is important to note that they are investigating in making it so that the shield burst will likely be unique to each support. In other words, supports are very unique in the way they're different from each other, so it's going to be important that these shield bursts basically fit their playstyle. So for instance, with Hank's shield burst here, you can see that it decreases over a period of time. But then with a character like Tech Sergeant Hank, the shield probably won't decrease and it'll actually allow it to stay, because of course that adds on to him shield charging people and building up the shield for his team. And then we can actually predict that supports that perhaps don't have very good utility to actually, mitigate and avoid the monster will probably have more powerful shield bursts. Now I know from the initial get-go that looking at Hank's shield burst, it perhaps doesn't look a lot. I can assure you, or I was assured, that this apparently is actually quite a lot. start, and you've got to remember that you get a 30-meter, radius, and you're being able to charge up your whole team by doing this. Also, as you can imagine, I would have thought that the cooldown for this is not that long, because if this is replacing the cloak, then supports of course need that sort of mitigation room, and I think that's something that will be definitely important and will be exciting to see how that will actually play out. But I think it's been well said that this will actually help the support the team with this ability, and then it's just going to remove a lot of the toxic play that the cloak caused. It is understandable that a few of you will probably have quite a bit of criticism about this, but you have to remember that you haven't seen the rest of the changes coming in this title update. This is only a fraction of it, and it will definitely start to make more and more sense as we get teased out more information about this title update. I know that one of the changes is that shields will be working slightly differently. I think it's more so that the shields will actually shield the health you have rather than the full bar. But having said that, I don't know the very specifics on the actual matter, and I'm sure whatever the situation, it will probably work quite well. Again, if you have any questions about these changes, of course you can go to the forums, and I'm sure the developers will answer most of the questions that, are viable, but remember, there's a lot more to come. Just finally adding on to the cloak changes, I know some people might ask what is happening to Lazarus, because of course he is one character that does have a personal cloak. As far as I'm aware, he will be keeping his cloak, but that isn't to say that he might be getting some sort of change in the future. So finally, we move on to the Assault, who is the last one to have a class ability change. This one I was actually quite surprised to hear, but actually it does make a lot of sense, and I think it looks a lot better as well. So it seems that TRS have wanted to make shields more of a support unique thing, which means removing it completely from the Assault. It also comes to be a little bit confusing for new players that don't really understand where the shields are coming from, and also the fact that, they will probably start to damage the Assault thinking they're actually doing damage because they see progression of the shield going down, when in fact it's not actually giving them any progression at all. So they've actually changed it in two ways. One, visually, and secondly, how it actually works. So actually having a look at it from the Assault's POV, you can see that the sides of the screen have a sort of white pulse with these sort of white hexagons coming through. So this isn't actually a shield, but a form of very, very high damage resistance. In terms of how it looks from a different person's perspective, you can see that they've got a very big layer over the top of the Assault, making it very obvious that this is going to be protecting him. And so I don't think this is going to change the Assault up massively. It's more of a visual thing for players as far as I'm aware. So I'm assuming you could do everything you used to do with a personal shield in terms of, say, blocking abilities, but it's visually different and you will take damage, however, it'll be very minimal damage. Also, the kind of white pulse effect that's given off when you have this ability active, apparently a lot of other effects are going to be like that for other hunters for when they do have an effect on them. So in other words, they're going to make effects a lot more obvious, and just something to keep in mind for this future title update. Anyway guys, those were the 3 class ability changes, and I know that's a lot to take in. I'm going to leave a link to the forum post about this topic in the description, so that if you want to go and ask some questions there, I'm sure that there will be people to help you out. I know I keep banging on about it, but just remember that there's a lot of other things that are going to be coming into the game that still need to be explained. Again, I'll be making more videos a lot like this one that will explain what is going on when they get revealed. Otherwise than that, cheers for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.